Good evening, folks. We'll just get started in just 1 minute. Thank you guys for coming tonight. Good evening, y'all. Thank you for coming. My name is John Ann, and I'm the director here at Raise Your Hand. I'm going to first introduce Irene, our interpreter with instructions for how to access the webinar in Spanish. We're also live on Raise Your Hand's Facebook page. Irene, can you come on and explain?
Yes, thank you. Buenas noches a todos. Soy Irene, seré la intérprete de esta noche. Vamos a tener servicios de interpretación simultánea. Si desea usar la opción de interpretación, la función se prenderá después de que yo termine de dar las instrucciones. En su pantalla, debajo en la barra, a la mano derecha, aparecerá un globo. Usted presione el globo y escoja, ese dice interpretación, y escoja español, por favor, para poder escuchar la junta, el web seminario, perdón, en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Irene. All right. So thank you to the over 100 folks who registered to attend this event. I think none of us expected to be experts in air quality, ventilation, or filtration this year. I know we're all exhausted and busy as we close the end of the year, but we, alongside LSNA, felt compelled to hold this event around air filtration before break to help parents, educators, and students understand the details just a little bit better. CPS continues to struggle with the understanding that trust is not given, but earned. Trust for parents is about inclusion. Parents, especially Black and brown parents, have been excluded from the beginning. While CPS claims their intent and attempts to include parents, the impact is that Black and brown parents, along with students and teachers, have not been included in any real design, implementation, or transition. Last month, I was texting with a former student on the Southwest side, and I found that his entire family got COVID and his mom passed away. By now, for many of us, it's not about if we know someone, but how many and how bad. When institutions use words like equity as the reason to go back without doing all that they can to make it feel safe, it feels like an insult to my former student and to our families. COVID doesn't affect us all equally. The positivity rate of Black and brown folks in Cook County is 469 out of every 100,000. The national average is 80 out of every 100,000 for white folks. The pain is just not the same. There are things that parents, educators, and students and CPS can do together. We can work together to improve on remote learning, establish robust testing, and include families in the process so we can start building trust. Now I'm going to turn it over to Monica from LSNA.
Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Monica Spinozza and I am a CPS parent and an education organizer with the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. We are here tonight to ask questions and speak up because we need to get this right. Any error could cost lives. 1 of every 577 people in our zip code 60639 have died from COVID so far. Just this week, the husband of a longtime LSNA parent leader, Delia Bonilla, passed away due to COVID. None of this is fair. We are losing a disproportionate number of Black and Brown lives every day, and it's not acceptable. We need transparency from CPS. With no clarity, how can we have safety, equity, and trust in our reopening plan? COVID transmission is through the air. CPS asks students and teachers to stay in the same classroom together for 7 hours, so the atmosphere must be safe to breathe. Masks are so important, but they're not enough. Distance is so essential, but it's not enough. Lysol wipes are not enough. So let's all start by taking a deep breath together and committing to fight for the air we breathe. Thank you, and back to our moderator for the night, Yanan from Raise Your Hand.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna just first start off by having Carl Tutt and Sterling Laylock introduce themselves, their experience, kind of how they got here. And then what we're gonna do is gonna start with 4 questions on topics that came up most with parents, and then open up the floor for questions. So you can either use the raise your hand feature or put them in the Q&A. So again, we're gonna just do 4 questions, and the majority of the time will be open for any questions that you have. So Carl or Sterling, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carl Tutt. I'm the managing partner for Integrating Green Technologies. The company specializes in indoor air quality, water, health, and safety. We've been around since 2009. And prior to that, my experience is with McDonald's Corporation, almost 25 years. And prior to that was in public accounting. You want to say? And I'll talk about how we got here tonight.
Yes, I'm Sterling Laylock, and my focus in integrating green technologies is behavioral economics, especially the interrelationship between people and advanced technologies. And clearly, technology is an integral part of the solution set. And we also spend a lot of time in environmental consulting, and specifically environmental justice. This is an environmental justice issue. We spend 90% of our time inside buildings. They store us and our stuff. So what goes on in that building is very, very important. And there's a lot of information that has been left out that we really need to know what it is.
And so to go along with what Sterling does, I also am involved with sustainable facilities operation, and just want to talk for a minute about how we got to be engaged in this particular situation. So it so happens that a friend of mine sent us the press release that came out from CPS, a safe environment for the students to go back to school. And when I read that, it was alarming to me. And I thought there were some things that were missing, more things that needed to be discussed. Actually, and I said, we got some issues here. I'm not sure if this is going to be enough going back to school. And so what we did, we took some action to the mayor's office. We reached out to the Chicago Public School System, Dr. Janice Jackson. And we also reached out to the Chicago Teachers Union. And the only ones that really responded to us was CTU. And so it allowed us to put some things on the table with them to let them know what our observations were. And then we continue to do more research to dig further as to how we can help make going back to school what it needs to be for Chicago Public Schools. So that's why we're here tonight.
Great. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. We'll just get started with those questions. So the first question that we had was, parents have heard a lot about the CPS ventilation and air quality assessment study. Can you describe what you know about their study and any issues you may have with it?
Well, when we look at the study, it basically did an evaluation of spaces in terms of offices, classrooms, and other types. But it only focused on the indoor air quality of 20% of the classrooms. So that means 80% of the classrooms were pretty much relegated to a walkthrough. And there was a determination as to whether or not there was any odor that could be detected. But there are many, many gases and many kinds of things that are toxic to adults and especially children that you won't smell. You really can't just look and sniff and think you're going to have the answers. The other thing that we found that was quite questionable is we don't have any kind of space in terms of the size of the classrooms. Because when we start talking about ventilation, length times width times height gives you volume of how much air is in that room. And then if we're saying that we're going to use indoor air purifiers to help clean that air, the question becomes, how many times per hour will that air be filtered? That's a key component. And are the air purifiers sized to optimize the room that they're going to be in? The one product where I think the Chicago Public Schools purchased 25,000 units. Well, the maximum square footage is 500 square feet.
Or less.
So, it's really, it could be a great machine, but it needs to be done by specification, and we don't have enough of the specifications. We know the $8.5 million approximate that they spent, the 20,000 to 25,000 units that they purchased. We know that it's a HEPA design unit, but that's only part of the story. And these are the kinds of things that really need to be put forth, because all of these specifications are available. They know what they are, but the parents don't know, teachers don't know, students don't know, and all the community stakeholders do not know, and we deserve to know.
Is a report. I've been listening to some of the other news feeds that have been coming through. Yes, that there's a plan. And we're happy to know that there's a plan, but we like to see it so we can evaluate it, see how it fits with the study that was done, identify some of the things that are well in that plan, but also identify the things that are missing that need to be looked at from a procedural and protocol standpoint. And those are the things that we need to see so that we can share that, validate it, so that you can be comfortable about your children coming back to school.
Great. Thank you guys for that. I think you guys have already alluded to, but the second question was around air purifiers. I sure don't know too much about these acronyms or the percentages. Can you explain what the district has informed you both already about it and what your concerns are?
Well, what we see is what's public facing. We can go on the website of the company. We've contacted the company. They sent us a copy of their owner's manual, but there's still a lot of information that isn't there. And we were sort of directed by the company to send an email to then ask the specific questions of what we want to know. That's sort of questionable. And these kinds of things are typically available on the website so that you can see what the specifications are. You can see how much energy they use, how many times the air is going to be changed per hour, and size room, you have to size it properly. And we really need to have information that tells us that we're somewhere around 5 times per hour, the air is going to be changed. So, you know, if we can see those kinds of things, then it's going to be much more appropriate for us to say, I'm a teacher, my classroom is this size, and it needs to be pretty much under 500 square feet, because that particular unit that is the one that's most prevalent is designed to do HEPA at 99.999 at 500 square feet or less. So this is very concerning to us. One of the questions in the chat is asking about that, and you could simply measure the length times the width of your classroom and multiply the two, and it's going to tell you how many square feet it is. How we're going to maintain these air purifiers. Who's going to change the filter? How will we know when the filters need to be changed? All of these kinds of things you really need to know to optimize the use of the device. It's great to have a technology, but if you don't operate it properly as the user and people understand what's supposed to be going on, it's not going to be all that helpful. We don't know, like, for example, when we listen to what the school system, CPS, is saying, we've consulted with the best experts. Well, guess what? There's no secret information that the experts are only telling Chicago Public Schools or anyone else out there. If you know where to look and you're in this industry of the built environment, which we are and have been for many, many, many years, green building, certified building, the health and safety of people in buildings. We've been doing this for a number of years. So this information in a national pandemic is available if you know where to look and if you drill down and if you understand it. It's not complicated. But if you don't have the data, then we can't even evaluate whether or not we feel that this is the way that it should be done. A lot of the things that are being told to various institutions like CPS, they sometimes will pick and choose what things are the most convenient, and that will convince people that they've done all that they could do, but they haven't. And that's a problem.
So let's talk about a little bit more specific about the air purifier. So an air purifier is there to collect particles that are in the room. It's like a fan in reverse. So what it's doing is pulling all the particles in the air and it's pulling it into a filter. So let's say you have, people in the room that have influenza, have COVID, those particles are being pulled into that filter. Now the question becomes, it goes back to what Sterling was talking about, and you're in a classroom situation, who's the person that changes the filter when it's time to change it? Is the school maintenance guy coming to do it? Is the teacher going to be required to do it? At the same time, how do you know it's working properly? So in the process, or the report that we received, there was no discussion about monitoring that air purifier. So you could be in a room and the air purifier is running, but it's not properly or adequately taking care of that room. You need to have something in place where the teacher can see at any given point in time what the air status of that room. So that way, if there's any changes that are dramatic, that teacher can bring attention to an administrator or to maintenance, and to have a protocol on how to move those students out of that room and into another safe area. But these are things that, again, have not been discussed in the report. And again, we have not seen a plan of action.
Additionally, that indoor air quality, all of the experts, the same ones that Chicago Public Schools they've been conferring with, the American Society of heating, refrigeration, air conditioning, they're saying you want to maintain the indoor air quality in a certain range of and humidity so that it is less likely a breeding ground for COVID or any other kind of airborne pathogen. And what they've come up with is the relative humidity must be between, at the high end, 50%, and at the low end, 30%. How will we know that we're there? We don't even have a basic indoor air quality monitor in the classroom. And then, of course, what's going to happen when you walk out of the classroom and now you're in the common area hallway? So you won't know what corrective action to take because you won't know where you are and you won't know where you need to be. And one of the things we said this morning is that's just like driving a school bus with no dashboard. It's not going to be acceptable. You won't be able to put that vehicle on the road. So if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. And if we can't manage it, things can easily get out of control and we won't even know it. And no one can explain to me or convince me that I'm a teacher, I'm a student. In the back of my mind, we're not sure if the place is going to be safe. This is problematic. And we need the answer, have the answers, but they have not shared them with us, and we deserve to know.
Thank you for that. As a parent of two youngsters at home and CPS students and an education organizer, I have a really important question to ask since we have young kids as young as second graders saying that they don't want to go back to school because they're afraid they might die of COVID-19, and that is heartbreaking. So my next question to you is, for you both, is much of the CPS reopening plans depends hyper-locally at each school. What questions should us parents be asking their school, and what should us parents be doing at home?
This is an excellent question, and it is right to my heart and my brain at the same time. And we know our heart is in our brain, right? So the first thing is, are you in a school with a centralized system or not? Because you have to operate differently depending on what the situation is. If it's a centralized system, there is a rating system for the filtration of the air in an HVAC centralized system, and it's called MERV. So we'll just worry about the first two letters, minimum efficiency. So the minimum efficiency before COVID nationally for public schools was MERV 8 on a scale of 1 to 16. Not really so good. So now that we are in the COVID era, ASHRAE has come back and said, we've got to update the standard because we haven't looked at this forever. And of course, if you say 8, you're really only talking about like dust and maybe pollen, but probably not, right? Now it's MERV 13, but you can't just take a MERV 13 filter and put it in an HVAC system that may not be able to draw and circulate enough air strong enough to access that filter. So we are. We need to know that. We need to know the current condition. In the report, it says that that whatever air system is in a school, the only thing they're telling us is it functions as designed, or it operates as designed, whatever their language is. It is unfortunate that we're even having that kind of a conversation, because we need to know what's the age of the air system, what air system we have, if they've made any improvements to the air system, what repairs did they make, what was the before and after, or did they do anything, or are they planning to do something? And if so, what are those things and by when? These are basic, simple things. Now, excellent. Now, my second grader is going to go home. So what should we be doing at home? I have an air system at home, right? Now, one would think that when it was time to do recycling and time to not have children eat paint chips and all these things, the information came from school. Now, here's a little known history fact. We know we don't have a nurse in every school. We should. How did the nurse get in school in the first place? I asked this question and people started thinking, the nurse got in school over 100 years ago when we had the pandemic of the Spanish flu thing that we keep referring to. That's how the nurse was established in the school in the first place. So we've been knowing this. We know what to do. And all the nations around the world that we see that are doing an effective job, they're following the standards of the United States of America. And we're not doing our own stuff. We're saying we're following science, but we're not doing science, and we're not including everyone in the conversation. And if we say we're following recommendations and standards, guess what? CDC says, talk to the teachers, talk to the staff, talk to the facilities folks that run the school, talk to parents, talk to the children. And they're also saying, and talk to the union where applicable. Hasn't happened. So they're not following the science. They're picking and choosing a la carte of what they want to do, what they don't want to do, it based on their own mindset and talking to each other. And they need to be including everyone that's going to be impacted, because the teachers, the students, staff that is going to be the ones to implement it in the first place. They're not going to come from the downtown and come into your school and do it. You're going to have to do it. So this is just not acceptable. It's just not. It's not fair. It's not right. And it's not going to stand.
So Monica, let's talk about the children just for a moment, because I heard you when you said that. And I think about my grandsons. I have 6 grandsons. And my 10-year-old, even if it's for a little while.
You got to back up a little bit. You froze up. We didn't hear you.
Okay. When he goes outside, he feels like he has to take his clothes off. Sometimes he'll take a shower every 18 hours because he's concerned about COVID. And so what I do with him, and I'm in a position to be able to ask questions and answer him and give him facts, how you can protect yourself from it and not be paranoid about it. And I think we have to provide the same thing for all children before they go back to school. Because if we don't do that, they're going to be going to school in fear. So now that means you're putting emotional trauma into the situation. So as much as we can, we need to, in small bites, not try to give it all at one time, but in small bites, just give them information and talk them through it so they can feel confident and comfortable about going back into an in-person school situation.
Thank you for your feedback. Mr. Laylock, you touch a point that is really important to us, right? You said like not every school has a nurse, and the zip code 60639, it's we suffer from a lack of services and lack of resources in our community, right? So my next question to you both is like, you both have experience working nationally and internationally. What are you seeing other districts across the world doing the CPS should consider?
Well, other school systems around America are struggling with the same issues as CPS, right? To some degree or another, right? Now, when you go internationally, you go to Taiwan, they have it down packed. They are not playing around. Everything is on regimen. All the kids know what's supposed to happen when they come to school. when they came back to school for COVID, your parents had to bring you to school. The teachers are all out in front of the school screening everyone, but in a flow, right? And then you look at Singapore, Malaysia, all these places. Do they have it perfect? No one does. But we're not talking about, do we have nurses? Do we have PPE? They have it because they're very serious about it. Then you say, all right, let's go closer to home. Let's go to the Caribbean. Let's go to Barbados. They are on regimen. The parents know what they're supposed to do. The children know what they're supposed to do. The teachers know what they're supposed to do. Now, I've never been a teacher, but one thing I have done is I've been there that week before class, helping to decorate classrooms, right? Because I promised a teacher friend of mine I would help. And you got to carry the books, so you have to do the whole thing. So that week before school starts is when all that happens. From what we're hearing, there's still going to be a week before school starts. But now it's all these other things on top. That is not the right way to do it. People are going to have to start to have time to learn what to do, to learn what's expected. And teachers, once again, as usual, are being asked to do things that are out of the scope of the job. And this happens consistently. So, to not have a conversation around what needs to happen so that we can have successful results and who's supposed to do what and how does it work and how we know if we're doing it good, if we're not doing it good. Teachers really are very, very concerned about these kinds of things. And people need to have an opportunity to learn and practice, because this is about how we operate, maintain, how we measure, verify, and how we determine what needs to happen to get back on track and do immediate corrective action if we see something out of sorts. So.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat from a Michael Sheehan. He said, I've seen universities, churches, and other public schools installing devices that can kill viruses and remove other contaminants from the air. Why doesn't CPS have that as part of their plan? Well, Michael, that's a good question. And we want to have the answer to that too. There are devices out there, and I think what you're talking about is ionization devices.
Yep.
And so these are devices that kill particulates in the air. So it's not going into a filter, so to speak. It's emitting an ionized air system that will kill particles in the air. Now, I don't know if CPS can return those 25,000 devices that they purchased, but if they can, I would suggest that they should, and we identify the right size air purifier that can ionize. And what that means, when I say ionize, what you're doing is you're making the inside like the outside. So if you were in a forest preserve or something like that, that's an ionized environment. And into a building to minimize any particulates, which we as people, we're the ones that bring into the room. Particulates don't exist without us. And so that that type of air purifier will kill all those particulates and create that type of ionized environment that's very safe.
Now, if we were to go downtown and say, let's go to an A or B class office building, what do they have? They have air purifiers. They have ionization, a lot of them. They even have technology to choose the floor you want to be on an elevator with a foot device as opposed to a hand device, so they don't keep having everyone touching the panel. So there's all these various things. And we know that there is better out there. We also know that in this case, we've got to train the occupants of the building. They're not going to bring people back into, you know, full-blown office buildings and say, well, just go in and see what happens. People understand there's a protocol, there's a regimen, and we deserve to have a chance to learn, to understand. And we also know that the various technologies that are out there, we're not talking about, you know, the air quality on the International Space Station. We're talking about, you go to a shopping mall, you could use this technology at your home. And, you know, businesses want people to come back to work. Okay, I told you part of my background is behavioral economics. We know what this is about. Businesses want people to come back to work. People want to come back to work. People who don't have jobs want to get jobs and go back to work. In order for that to happen, children have to go back to school if you have people who are employees with children. But it all needs to work together in.
Oh, you froze, Sterling.
We'll give Sterling a minute to reset. Carl, did you have anything else to add, or we can also move on?
I can piggyback off of what Sterling is saying. It all has to work together. So let's look at the analogy of an orchestra. You know, orchestra has different sections in it. So it's got the woodwinds, it's got the violins, the violas, it's got the clarinets, all these different sections. And it needs every section to be able to give the music the way it needs to. Even down to the person that has the triangle. You know, the triangle, they have the ding in the triangle. We need those pieces to be able to make that orchestra sound the way it's supposed to sound. And that's what we have to do in this COVID environment. The report that was put out is not going to be sufficient. There are another pieces, more pieces that have to be so that everyone can feel comfortable and be able to move forward. We have to do.
Great. Carl, I hope your internet doesn't go out either, because I sure as hell don't have the answers. And so we'll start with one question, and there's plenty of questions in the Q&A, and we'll keep it moving. So I'll put this in. The first one that we got is, it is recommended that there are 4 to 5 air changes in a given room. Are HEPA air filters sized appropriately for the rooms that they will be assigned? And is there a target air change per hour? So this question, I think you've already iterated a little bit, but I just want to kind of give that kind of the clear answer, and then we'll move on to our second one.
Yeah, because when you talk about HEPA filters, that's in the HVAC system. When we talk about air changes, we're also talking about air purification systems. And so we want to have, at a minimum, 6 air changes per hour. Now, some people will say, well, if you go back to ASHRAE or you go back to the standard, they say 2 changes per hour may be sufficient. But our COVID positivity rate is 5-6 times higher than the national average.
That's right.
In a classroom with people that may have a positivity rate 5 or 6 times above the norm. Let's increase that airflow so that we can make sure we put these young people in a position so that they can feel safe and our teachers can feel safe. So 6 times per hour should be the standard for this particular situation.
Great, thank you for that. The second question is from Dan. Is there a simple checklist that we can use to evaluate our own classrooms? I think someone, maybe Sterling or Carl, you mentioned one of those things, but is there a simple checklist that we can use to evaluate our own classrooms?
Yes, and we can, it's not an exhaustive list, but this will get you started. You want to measure the area of your room. You also want to know what kind of products are being used to disinfect the room, because they're going to clean according to their plan every night. A lot of these EPA or an FDA approved cleaning agents and disinfectants, they're very powerful. So that means now that air purifier, you don't turn that off when you go home. It needs to work constantly 24/7 so that it is taking now those impurities out of the air. It's very similar to something that you could relate to. You know how when it begins to rain and it's so sweet, so everybody opens the windows or they go outside and they're like, oh, it's getting ready to rain. It really smells great. That's not good. That's ozone. and we should not be breathing that in. So just some of these basics we have to know. I know we all did it. Before I knew, I did the same. Oh, it's about to rain. Oh, it smells really great. So nice and sweet. That's ozone. So if we want to know what cleaners are being used, so we want to know what's on the label. We want to make sure that whatever air purifier is used in the classroom is that it is a commercial grade unit that will be okay running all day and all night. It's not something that you turn off. We also want to make sure that we follow all of the best practices that they do have of the social distancing of the desks, but there's a lot of controversy around that as well, because most studies will tell you 6 feet is not enough.
Right.
So we're talking about having up to 15 students in a class. Well, before COVID, we were supposed to have 30. But if you talk to teachers, 30 becomes 35, 35 becomes 40, and that's how it starts. But then that's not what we're going by. And then how will we know if the kinds of things that we're doing in our classroom are going to work? You also want to know if you have access to outside ventilated air, a window. Then you also have to take into consideration what the condition of the air is outside. You have a school that's on a busy street and buses and trucks going by. Now you got soot from diesel coming in, diesel exhaust coming into the building. And this is why you want to have an indoor air quality monitor in every single classroom and in every single office so you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So we can provide a list of the kinds of things that all of the various, CDC, ASHRAE, and others are talking about in terms of specific classrooms. And we can break it down, but it also provides you with the link that talks about the kinds of corrective action and the kinds of protocols and the kinds of things that you need to be considering, because it's not a one size fits all. It depends on the particular situation of the architecture, size of your classroom, and some of these other attributes, but we'll make it easy for you to be able to read up about it and follow it.
Great. Carl and Sterling will definitely type up some of the questions they had mentioned and some of these standards for us, and I'll send out in a post-event email, hopefully by Friday. The second question is, are there plans to monitor CO2 levels in rooms once students are back? Higher CO2 is an indication that ventilation is inadequate.
We haven't seen the rest of the report. We haven't seen anything that talks about any ongoing measurement or management once we get back in school. This is part of the reason why we're saying there has to be more. There have to be more details. The folks that got hired to put this together, they got a scope of work. They got a teacher's assignment. So of course, if we're not seeing the report, then it's incomplete, or you didn't do your homework, and you're gonna send them back and say, hey, finish this and I'll give you some more time. But typically when this happens, it's because there are things in there that are unflattering. There's bad news in there, probably. But that doesn't matter. We have to know what it is. We have to identify it, come up with solutions around it, and what we're going to do about it and by when.
Right.
This is how it works. We have to do the problem solving. We can't say we're following the science. We have to do the science. We have to solve the problems. This is not really something that you can manage your way through. You've absolutely got to know the CO2 in the classroom. They didn't measure CO2 when they examined the classrooms for their assessment, because they said there's no people in the room. And of course, the CO2 comes from people. But a plan to actually measure CO2 once we get into the classroom, they haven't commented on it. We haven't heard anything about it. And additionally, the water in the pipes has been stagnant in the building. They haven't talked about flushing the plumbing pipes. These are all things that you do to recommission buildings. This is straight out of the book. This is not like, you know, new science because of COVID, but they're not talking about doing that. They're not talking about lids over toilet. Flush the toilet, human waste contains the COVID, COVID now airborne in the bathroom. We haven't seen any response to any of these kinds of things. And all the experts, this is what they're talking about. These are the kinds of things we have to investigate and we need to know.
Thank you for that. Next question is from Tracy. And Tracy, if I mess this up, please add an addendum question. So they are in an old school that does not have a centralized HVAC system. So I think, which is the second part of the questions, right? How effective are portable / plug-in HVAC units like the one CPS plans to add to classrooms to protect the inhabitants from a virus compared to a centralized unit?
Well, that's an apple to an orange, but here goes. Let's suppose we are in a patient room at a hospital. They have medical grade air purifiers to be used in hospitals. There are classes of all these devices. So they can be effective. But if we don't know the size of the room it's going in, if we don't know the specifications of the particular device, how many the air going to change an hour we spoke about, what the energy efficiency is, how much noise we're talking about, all these various things have to be considered, and they are the basic specifications. And of course, there are test results. Now, some companies use third-party testing agencies, and then other companies test the units themselves. In the case of Chicago Public Schools and the devices that they chose, we don't know. There's other, but they have been tested. We haven't seen any of the test results. We haven't seen any of the methodology behind why they chose what they chose, or what they were looking for, or what their criteria was. So these kinds of things are going to give people a comfort level, but it requires a conversation. It requires collaboration. It requires communication. This is a challenge. It has to be addressed.
Thank you for that. And again, folks, you can submit questions on the Q&A, or you can use the raise your hand feature if you want to speak directly, and I can unmute you. The next question is, what monitors are placed in classrooms to measure air filtration for forced air systems, and who does that modulation? Again, what monitors are placed in classrooms to measure air filtration for forced air systems, and who does their modulation?
Well, when you're, typically speaking, when you're it could be a classroom or any room, you are typically looking for temperature, you're looking for relative humidity, CO2, particulate, etc. It will not detect the virus. They're not there yet. However, there are parameters at which you can stay between, and then you can create a likelihood or a greater possibility of having the cleanest air possible. There are a whole host of other add-ons that you can put on a HVAC system to measure airflow, to measure the direction of the flow, and do all these kinds of things. But if you don't know what the base system is that you have to work with, you won't have a way of knowing what your options are. So HVAC is a very vast a space. So it's just not something that you can go into guessing. It's not a consumer item that industrial, commercial item, and we have them in our home. And, you know, just because you pay more for something doesn't mean it's going to be better. But you do need to know what it is that you have to see if it's even adaptable or you can make an improvement. But chances are, if it's really, really, really old, you need a new one.
When you have a type of question like that, now you're getting into sophistication.
That's right.
So now you're talking about having a monitor on an iPad that, and you get into analytics.
That's right.
And all that in that room. Now, it'd be nice to have that, but you think about the average age of a Chicago public school. A lot that has to take place internally in that HVAC system for you to be able to monitor to that extent. And they're not there yet. And so that's why if we can just do the simple thing, have the monitoring aspect for air filtration, that could give us enough information to be able to maintain a safe environment.
Yeah, to be as safe as possible with what we have. Sometimes you got to work with what you have. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know you don't know what you have, and you don't know what your baseline is or what you're starting from, you know, we don't, you know, we're not a school $50 million shopping mall. They have all these things. You know, they want people to come back to movie theaters. All these technologies, people are checking out a lot of different kinds of technologies. But if we're going to say some schools have no ventilation and we're going to use this little magic box that covers 500 square feet to be our primary source of ventilation, that's problematic.
Just a quick clarifying question from Quentin. Mm-hmm. To review, you said 30 to 50% humidity is optimal.
It's 60 on the high end, 30% on the low end. So you want to be in the middle of that.
Thank you. The next question is from an attendee. So the report I am looking at states that my classroom is ready for students, but when I look at the classroom, there is no air purifier. Is this because there is an HVAC system that does this for the room? There are no monitors in the room. I'm not sure how they came to this decision according to this report that the room is ready.
I'm not sure what report you're looking at, but if you don't have any way to have an air purifier in that room or to be able to monitor that room is not ready at a minimum.
So this is on the CPS ventilation website where you can look up each school. Yes. I think that is what they are referring to.
Okay.
So let's look at that. When we're saying we're ready, remember, 20% of the classrooms had the indoor air tested, but did not include CO2. So 80% of the classrooms were a walkthrough and a sniff test to see if we could detect any odors. And then extrapolated that means now that X number of classrooms in a school, I looked at one, I think there were 75 classrooms. They said 71 are good, 4 are not. But I don't know how you get 2 out of 10, and then that means the other 8 out of 10 are okay, except for 4. It just doesn't make sense. On that report, it also doesn't tell us it doesn't tell us, is there a central system or not? It just says whatever is there is it works as designed. We need to know, is it a centralized one or not a centralized one? If it's a centralized HVAC system, is it MERV 8, 9, 10? Does it meet the standard of ASHRAE with the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning folks? Does it meet the MERV 13 rating for efficiency for filtering that we're talking about? And there's no one thing that's going to do it. So even if you have a HVAC, and even if it is MERV 13, well, you still need to be HEPA. So you still should probably have an air purifier. All of these things are working in concert because what you're trying to do is build a system. You're not trying to say I have this one thing and it's going to work, because there are no guarantees of any of it, but you need a workable system that you can monitor, you can measure, you can stay within parameter. And as Dr. Fauci said, We need to do as best we can. So the question becomes, is this the best that Chicago Public Schools can do in terms of indoor air quality? We don't know because we can't see the rest of their plan, but from what we do see, it's problematic.
You may, just a quick additional question from Heather. It says it may have a similar answer. So my school said that we're not getting air purifiers because of a window AC unit and the window can open. How effective is this? So
I'm
again,
sorry, Heather.
is my school.
It has a window AC unit.
Yep.
And so you're not getting an air purifier. Then there's no that, yeah, well, it's gonna, I mean, it's gonna be cold. You're not gonna be able
you opening up windows for children in the middle of winter in Chicago. So if you don't have anything in your room, and we're gonna keep stressing this, if you don't have anything in that room that can effectively pull particulates out of that room or kill those particulates in the air, you're not in a safe environment. And we can do it. It's available.
So thank you guys for that. So the next question is from Marnie. What options exist technologically for monitoring the air purifiers you've described?
Well, let's draw a distinction. You can monitor the air purifier. Is it functioning properly? And it depends on what is built into that air purifier. But most importantly, you want to monitor the air itself. So some air purifiers have an indicator that says that it's time to, that it's time to change the filter. Some give you some sort of an indicator light as to, is it working as designed? But without question, you want to know and measure the air itself, because that will give you the best baseline indicator of where you are. Because in some instances, there are air purifiers out there that purify the air and they provide humidity or dehumidifiers or humidifiers. So when we look at what's available and we see the technology across the board, there are many options. I'm sure that those options were explored. But if we don't know the methodology in how they specified that technology and what they were looking for to arrive at the decision, and then what the performance is of the air purifiers that have been chosen, we're just in the dark, and we don't know. Right. And we need to know. We need the details.
Sensing a trend here that we need to find out more details from CPS here. We're running a little bit low on time, so we have a few more questions left. The next question is from Rosa. Can a combination of imperfect measures add up to a decent air ventilation plan? For example, maybe the mechanical system can only do 4 air exchanges, but you can open windows and have a filter.
Yes, that is correct. But the key is knowing what the HVAC system can do, knowing what you have and what you don't have, and then coming up with a game plan to optimize what you do have. But if we don't have any of that information, we wouldn't know where to start. There are just basic fundamental things that we need to know in order to optimize what we do have.
There's always a way to get there. We just have to have the information to know how to fashion it properly.
That's right.
Another question. Sorry, did I cut you off, Carl?
No, I saw another question about climate change, heat, and energy recovery ventilation systems. Did you see that one?
Go for it, Carl. Pick it up.
It's a question saying, I think he's saying, many of us want CPS to retrofit our school buildings to address climate change? Are heat and energy recovery ventilation systems compatible with COVID prevention? And in other words, does energy retrofitting provide better ventilation for prevention of infectious diseases? So I
Well,
think we're talking about two different things. Go ahead.
yeah, but it really depends, because in many instances, when you get buildings that are really old, it's sometimes more costly to attempt to retrofit an existing building that may have, maybe at the end of its useful life, than to actually build a new building. And from what we're seeing, and this is not just unique to Chicago, this is a lot of cities, they have built stadiums and bridges and all kinds of things and neglected the schools. And it means that the public has to, lock arms and agree that there needs to be a general obligation bond to get these children and the families that deserve the services of the public schools new buildings. Now they're building new buildings, but then when you look at the existing buildings, it's taking too long to upgrade and make improvements. And until we do that, a lot of these newer technologies aren't going to really be cost effective, because you may put something new in the building and maybe the building's 65 years old and it has, 8 to 10 more years left. And then you're going to trash the building and build a new one anyway. So they really have to evaluate all of this and do the right thing and get modern, green, sustainable, energy efficient, people-centric buildings designed so children can learn, have the proper lighting, have the proper air, have the proper materials so that we don't have toxic materials, and really design schools so children can learn. It's being done in many, many places, but you can't just apply these things. You need a real program. You need a real rollout. And I'm not the first time anybody's hearing, our schools are dilapidated, we need new ones. Well, we're getting some, but it's not fast enough.
Absolutely, and it's not done equitably, right? The Raise Your Hand definitely agrees that there should be citywide facilities master planning that includes long-term solutions like addressing climate change. The last question that we have is from Dan. Are there proxy measurements that we can make of air quality / COVID filtration? Are there proxy measurements we can make of air quality and / COVID filtration?
Yes, there's guidance from the American Society of Heating, Air Conditioning and Refrigeration that is specific for building type, and they have it specific for schools. And it says what the parameters need to be, like the MERV 13, like in the terms of the report that someone said about their school, they're saying, well, if the humidity is less than 65, it's okay. Well, that's not what ASHRAE said. He said between 60% and 30%. So if you're below 30%, now you're back in the zone that's not optimal. So yes, that information can be provided. And, it's always a matter of pointing people in the right direction of where to look. So they don't have to just believe us. They can read for themselves what these national experts that have now revamped and looked at all these things have come up with. Things may change, but at least you have a baseline. We've got enough months now so that we're learning more every day and they're not stopping, because the science is what's going to get us out of this. But we can't just follow it. We have to do the science and do it flexibly so that people understand what's going on and make it as easy as possible for people to do it.
Great, thank you for that. One last question snuck in, so we're going to go for it.
Okay.
The HVAC system and CPS are an amalgamation of technologies that span at least half a century. I don't understand how CPS can possibly bring these systems up to current standards for filtration to meet our current needs. Updating filtration systems is no small task and seems impossible given the timeframe CPS is working in. Is this overstated?
No, it's not. And this is why we need to focus when you have that situation. Okay, my HVAC system is like chitty chitty bang bang before Dick Van Dyke made it the flying car. Okay, it's old, it's broke down, it's dilapidated. even small children, if you talk to them and they're 5 or 6 or 7, like Ms. Espinosa's second graders, they watch Thomas the Train all the time. They know what to do. If you ask them, they will tell you. So if we know that the fallback is air purifier, then within a reasonable budget limit, we need to be getting the best air purifier for the spaces that they're going to go into and the parameters of that particular space as possible, as opposed to a one size fits all for everyone that, from what we can see, has a maximum of 500 square feet. Now add in people, now add in other architectural challenges or parameters. And then we don't have information. The children would know. The children was, nah, you can't do that. That's not going to work. They would tell you it's not going to work.
Okay. Thank you all for this time. Thank you for attending tonight. I know we could go on for even longer. I'm sure we continue to have questions, but I know maybe 1 hour is just about enough for our little study here. So, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Very good questions, and I wish we have more time to answer more of these questions.
And so I do want to make the plug here that if you do have more questions for Sterling and Carl, you can email info@ILRaiseYourHand, which I'll put in the chat now. And then every week I can commit to sending them a batch of questions. As we know, science is changing, data is changing, and we might also get more information, hopefully, right? So again, thank you all for coming tonight. If you have questions, email us. We'll let them know. Please share this live stream, and we'll pass around also the completed video as well. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.